Hi, everyone. This is Yasmin, and welcome to the Risk Being Seen podcast. And in tonight's episode, I would like to talk about the Inside Quest episode featuring Robert Greene, who is the author of The 48 Laws of Power and The Art of Seduction, and also Mastery. And I think this is a really, really interesting episode. He touches on a lot of really foundational things, I think, that I'm trying to incorporate into my mind to help my journey into personal growth. So I'm going to kick it off with how the episode kicks off, actually, which is Tom Bilyeu asking him to define power. And Robert says something to, I'm paraphrasing here, but most things that happen in life you have no control over. Where you're born, who your parents were, what era and time you were born in, 95 to 96% of what happens in life you have no control over. Circumstances are just coming at you, and you have a tiny margin of control. And power is the ability to increase that margin of control. And you do this by controlling yourself through self-mastery. Power begins from within. And I was really surprised, I guess, that this is how the episode began, because the book is called, The 48 Laws of Power. So I thought it was going to be more about how you control other people or control circumstances. And what he's saying here is basically you control everything outside by controlling your own perception and controlling your own mind. And I really agree with that really strongly. So I like how he put it. Just you have that small margin of control. And basically, probably most of the population isn't trying to pursue self-mastery at all. So if you're even pursuing that even a little bit on the side, you're going to have more control over yourself. You're going to have more influence over other people, and you're probably going to do better. I'm not sure how I feel morally about having control over other people. I'm not as concerned about that. I'm more concerned with the things I have 100% of control over, which is myself and my own mind. I wouldn't say 100%, but I have some control over that, whereas I don't have control over other people and I don't have control over circumstances. So I really like this. Again, most things that happen in life you have no control over. Wow. And power begins from within. So that's how the episode starts. And he goes on to say, if you're aware of who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and if you're able to see how your emotions govern your life, if you can learn what your weaknesses are and how to control them slowly through this process of knowing who you are and understanding how they operate, you can be a person of power. So he's talking a little bit here about understanding yourself and what your strengths and weaknesses are, which is also what Kenny Florian talked about. Being in silence and quiet and understanding what your own opinions are and what things you like and don't like. And so I thought that's really interesting that both of them kind of touch on this. Let's see, what does Kenny say? Let me see if I have those notes here. Yes, test yourself and your capabilities. Testing yourself, finding out what your limits are, dealing with strengths, the struggles of winning and losing and pushing yourself day after day after day. You find out a lot about what your capabilities and deficiencies are, and maybe how those deficiencies are little hurdles to get you to another level. So that's sort of two takes on a similar thing. Robert is talking about if you find out what your weaknesses are and how to control them, and Kenny Florian is talking about how if you find out what your weaknesses are, maybe you can overcome them. And maybe they aren't a weakness, but just a stepping stone to push you further. So I thought that was kind of interesting, two sort of ways to look at that topic. But again, going back to understanding yourself, what you're good at, what you're not good at, understanding who you are, what you like, what you don't like. These are all ways to increase your power and control. Greene also says, the ability to understand what motivates and incentivizes the other person is the key to success. Stop the pattern of being inside your own head and instead immerse yourself in the other person and listen and figure them out. So I kind of feel like Robert is a little bit, he's a couple steps ahead of me. I'm trying to figure out, step one, figure out my own self. Step two, once I have that under control, then I can start looking outward and noticing other people, and again, trying to interact better with them. So there's, for me, I see two steps there. One, learning myself, and two, learning and paying attention to other people. But I guess they could be taken on at the same time, depending on what your goals are. So I like that he's sort of looking a step beyond where I've been looking in terms of personal growth. He goes on to say, he's talking about empathy. And he says, to understand people on a deep level and influence them, you have to get inside their skin. And this is something we need to practice. We're sleepwalking. We're inside our thoughts day in and day out, like a continually circling loop in our head. And if we're aware of that, and if we stop that and look at other people, a world opens up to us. So again, here he's talking about stopping the voices in your head and your constant sort of self-preoccupation. And if you can quiet that down and settle, then you can finally, if you quiet the noise of your own mind, you can look at other people and actually read all the information and signals that they're giving you that could help you interact with them better. This is really profound to me. Like, I walk around and people are just, they're like a box that I can't get into. I can't see it. I try to read people. I try to pay attention to their expressions. And I think I'm at least marginally aware of that. But yeah, I'm so caught up in my own mind and what's going on in my own head. If I could slow that down or quiet that, I think that I could interact with people better and understand them better. So this is definitely setting some new goals for me. Again, it feels weird for me to say I want to have power over people. That I'm a little squeamish about that, but I would like to be better with people, not so that I could control them, but so that hopefully I could interact with them better and maybe help them more. He says at some point in the episode, which I'll put in the notes, of course, they talk about feeling understood. And I know I've had those moments where I say something and someone says something back to me in return, and I'm kind of shocked. I'm just like, oh, you really heard me, or you really know me, or you really understand. And what a unique kind of feeling that is. And I think it's kind of rare. So if I could give that to people, I think that seems like a really nice thing to be able to do, to make people feel understood. That will make them feel better. And there is a lot of talk about depression and suicide right now because of some recent very high-profile suicides. And I think if we could quiet our minds and pick up more signals from other people, maybe we could help others who aren't overtly asking for help. Maybe it could help us see that they need our help without them having to whack us over the head with a frying pan. Here's another quote that's kind of relevant. It's from Tom says in the episode that the subconscious is taking info from the outside and it's running it against things it's already encountered to find interesting connections. I think that's a very interesting way to describe the subconscious mind. We've talked about this before, how your conscious mind is taking in such a fraction of the information that your unconscious mind is at any given moment. And I find it incredibly useful to think that in terms of while you're talking and you're thinking about the words that someone says, or you're thinking about what you're going to say next, that your subconscious is taking in all this other information and running it against its own database. of things that it's encountered before, and maybe feeding that into your conscious mind. I think that's really a new way for me to look at that, which is really, really interesting. Like your subconscious mind is going all the time. He has a quote here about from Robert about meditation, where he says, meditation quiets the mind and unleashes creative energies. And that's something I hadn't thought about meditation in terms of creativity before, but apparently for Robert, it is a huge and very powerful way that he gets in touch with his creative element is through meditation. For me, I always thought about it as mostly calming myself and becoming centered and becoming focused and becoming aware. But for him, when he does that, he also gets this like creative influence from his subconscious mind. And I think that's really interesting. I hope that as my meditation practice improves, that I start to see some changes there. I recently started meditating twice a day instead of once, and I'm finding that to be really, really different than just doing it once. So if you're out there and you're doing meditation, I would suggest that you try doing it multiple times a day, even if it means you do 2 shorter meditations. So that's something you might want to play around with. Here's another quote that Robert Greene said, that I ended up tweeting and putting on Facebook because I thought it was so obvious and yet so not how we operate. And that is that nothing in life is simple. Nothing is black or white. Everything is nuanced. And that hit me really hard because everything I see online, in every article that I read, nothing is really impartial. Everything is just always pushing me to think one way or the other. Everything I read is always pulling me toward one opinion or another, instead of making a case for the opinion and then having me read it and consider it and then decide how I want to feel about it. I guess that's it. I feel a lot of articles and content online is geared to tell me how I should feel about things, instead of giving me information and a viewpoint or facts or whatever, and letting me sort it out for myself. So I think this is a really powerful one as we go through our days, just trying to get through all of the things that grab our attention. Nothing is black and white. So when you read something online, even if it's a good thing or a bad thing, of like, oh, here, be outraged about this horrible thing, or oh, be super supportive of this great thing, there's a whole story behind that maybe I should go and investigate before I retweet it or, give it a thumbs up or a like or whatever. Everything has 2 sides to it, probably. And I, for me, want to give myself the space to decide which things I want to delve into and actually look beyond just the tweet about it, right? And go read a few articles, and probably go read a lot of articles, and go question the sources and do more critical thinking, because I agree with what Robert Greene says here. Everything is nuanced, and that's definitely not how information is presented to us in this current day and age. Leading from that, he talks about values, and I think this is amazing. You think everyone has the same values as you do, but they don't. Their values come from a completely different place. Talk, listen, observe, and get a feel for the different culture that they come from and the different values that they have. Do this over time. This information is available to us, but we don't bother to listen for it. This one struck me because there is a lot of talk about harassment and the Me Too movement and politics in general. And it's funny how I walk through life, and maybe the 20 or 30 or 50 people that I see every day, I just assume that we have some basic similar set of values. But it's always surprising to find out, and you can find out in just the randomness of ways, that someone that you think that you mostly agree with, that you mostly jive with, has a completely different opinion on something very fundamental than you. And that doesn't damage the friendship or anything. It just makes me stop and go, oh, wow, someone sees this completely differently. But it's funny how, I guess for our own safety, we just assume that, oh, everyone thinks this way, and oh, everyone's kind of liberal, and oh, everyone kind of thinks this, or everyone's conservative. You just kind of paint the world with your own ideas and morals and just assume until you know otherwise that everyone thinks similarly to you and that the variation is very small. But in actuality, the variation could be very, very large. And that's okay. I think it's okay for us to have different values and opinions, but it would be better if we knew about that so you could talk to people about it. It might expand our understanding and our circle and our mindsets to know that here's someone that I'm very close to, and they have this very different opinion, whether it's about religion or politics or whatever. And I can see that two people can have very different opinions, very different experiences, and still be close and still get along and still interact with each other and hopefully maybe learn from each other without one being converted or absorbed by the other. Does that make sense? I think we fall into this very us versus them mentality. But if you find out that them is really this person you're close to, then suddenly them isn't some enemy far away. It's, oh, maybe they're okay. If this person is like them, then, and I'm okay with this person, then them, an enemy, and us, it all kind of gets a little bit closer, if that makes any sense. I think we can connect with people better and stop this sort of finger pointing and drawing lines in the sand and this echo chamber creating and all this other stuff. So I'll read it again. You think that everyone has the same values as you, but they don't. Their values come from a completely different place. Talk, listen, observe, and get a feel for the different culture that they come from and the different values that they have. And do this over time. I think that's also really important, is I think we tend to judge everyone by the information that we have at this moment or the information that we have recently instead of thinking about it over time. How long have I known this person and what kind of values have they shown? And just because they show a certain thing to me today, how does that factor in when I calculate all the other experiences that I've had with them? I think we can be, again, this goes back to probably judging very quickly. If I think about myself today and I think about myself over my entire life, I've done and said some really stupid things that I'm not super proud of. But this is who I am today. And I think depending on what we're talking about, I want you to factor in the current me. And sometimes I want you to factor in, an average out my entire life and my entire adult life. So looking at things over time is also another interesting factor that we don't always take into account when we're trying to make very quick and very snap judgments. In the realm of the Me Too movement, I know there's been a lot of talk about witch hunts and things like that. It's hard for us to sometimes put ourselves in someone else's shoes. But the quote that I always come back to is, just because it isn't happening to you or just because it hasn't ever happened to you doesn't mean that it isn't happening to someone else or that they haven't experienced it. So I think taking into account someone else's life experience can be completely different than your own. And we have no idea. I mean, it's like when you have a friend for 20 years and all of a sudden you find out something huge about them that they've gone through in their life and you had no idea. And that's how people are. They can, if you don't ask and they don't share, it's possible for you to think you know someone and really have missed something so huge, so fundamental that they've experienced. And I think it's fair to say probably everybody in your life has something like that they haven't shared with you. And maybe you have something like that you haven't shared with someone. So I guess going back to these last several quotes, Nothing's black and white, everything's nuanced. You think people have the same values as you don't. It comes back to, don't assume that your values and your experience is everyone else's values or their experience, because it's probably not. In the next segment, they kind of start talking about learning and kind of a growth mindset, which again, Kenny Florian also talked about. But Robert Greene talks about retaining our childlike wonder and curiosity and keeping the beginner's mind. And he says that the feeling of superiority sneaks into you as you get older, and it stops you from learning anymore. So he says that the reason that children can learn everything is because they have to survive, and then they have an open mind, just wonder and curiosity. As we get older, we think we know everything, and the minute we think we know everything is when we stop learning. I think that is one of the definitions of a static mindset, is that you think you know everything. So beginner's mind is definitely also a topic that comes up in circles of meditation. When you label everything, that's a way to say that you know it, and therefore you stop asking questions about it. But if you have the beginner's mind, you see everything new and fresh, even if you've seen it 1,000 times. So be a student in all things, have an open mind, and have no fear of looking dumb. Yeah, that's really a hard one, because I know for myself, I realize that I have a thing about being right all the time. And that's something I have to fight. Is, oh, am I just trying to be right here? Is that actually helping? Is it better to be kind or to be right? I think if we let go of our posturing and trying to gain status by knowing everything or knowing more than another person, if you practice letting go of that, it gets easier over time. Just saying, oh, I don't know. Oh, this is a great one. Robert Greene talks about negative capability here. He says, negative capability is the ability to keep two contradictory ideas in your mind without having to come to a conclusion, without rushing to a judgment. So you're open to adopting 3 or 4 different viewpoints. I think this is so great. This goes back again to there's no black or white. We're in such a hurry just to get through our Facebook feed or get through our emails, get through our Twitter feed, and just thumbs up, thumbs down, everything. Just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But if you can hold 2 contradictory ideas in your mind without labeling them as right or wrong or good or bad, without rushing to just sort of dunk them into their own buckets, you can purge the cognitive load of having to think about it anymore. That's really powerful, because it will give you probably more perspective on things, and you'll think about them more deeply. Again, going back to everything that's nuanced. If you take everything at face value in the first 5 seconds and just bucket it as yes, no, thumbs down, thumbs up, thumbs down, you're missing out on a lot of it. You're just missing out on whatever it is that you're pondering. So being okay with ambiguity. As humans, our brain does not like ambiguity. It wants certainty, because there's ambiguity and implies unknown, and that's a risk for us. That's a survival risk. Whereas known means, okay, I know what this is. I know how to handle it. It's not a threat. I think you really have to work hard to cultivate a mindset where you're not upset or made uncomfortable by ambiguity. And you have to also be okay with being wrong, which goes back to the last quote about beginner's mind and curiosity and wonder and not having an ego. So that's something to cultivate. At least that's something I'm working on cultivating is, okay, what if I'm wrong here? I'll just say, okay, I'm wrong. And if it's okay, also okay to change my mind. Oh, I felt this way about that a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or yesterday. And today I feel differently. And I can change my mind and that's okay. I don't have to be the same person all the time. And I can hold these 3 or 4 different viewpoints and not make a judgment on it. I can say, oh, I'm still not sure how I feel about that. I'm still investigating. I'm still talking to people about it. I'm still forming an opinion. It doesn't have to be in the first 5 seconds. You can close your Facebook and go to the next app. Wow, there's some really good stuff in here. They go on to talk about growth. And Greene says, you have to embrace pain. If there's no resistance, you're not going to get anywhere in life. You need resistance to grow. You need something to push against. Necessity pushes us. We're animals of necessity. And I, in the journey of this podcast, have realized that that is kind of true. I've been living my life without a lot of resistance for many, many years. And thus, I haven't had a lot of growth. And I think challenging yourself and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is definitely a way for you to grow, but it's so hard to find what the right form of resistance is. Is it a physical activity? Is it a relationship? Is it a intellectual activity? What is it? I don't know. I'm still just now figuring that out, but I do see that there really can't be growth without some kind of resistance. And then I wonder how failure plays into that. I think failure is a particular kind of resistance, and you definitely get a lot of growth out of that, or you can. Oh, and actually, he mentions the obstacle is the way. So I guess that's kind of an entire book by Ryan Holiday, which is a great book. I highly recommend it, about how to handle obstacles. But again, going back to Kenny Florian, you want to be wary of how you label obstacles. If they're hurdles, which imply they're things you get over, or if they're roadblocks, which imply that you're kind of stuck. Let's see, Robert Greene also says something really nice here. I like this one. We're each truly one of a kind. As we get older, we become more and more like other people. He says, mind your weirdness. You're becoming a copy of other people. Yeah, I know there are a lot of speakers who talk about this. I think Seth Godin has a whole book about this, about how culture and society and parents, family, et cetera, everyone else's expectations were kind of put into the herd, put into kind of this factory mentality. You go into school, and then you go in and you find a job, and then you get married, and then you have X number of kids, and then you retire, and then you die. And because that's just what everyone does. So I like that he says here, we're each truly, truly one of a kind. And he goes through the statistics of how, the one sperm found its way in all of the, sperm, and just the statistics of you being born, you right now, is phenomenal. Someone else talks about this too. Gary Vee, maybe? But yeah, I think in school and stuff, we're kind of taught to hide our weirdness and to just be like everyone else within a certain range. Oh, your hair can be a little different. Maybe you can dress a little different. And your musical taste, sure, that's an okay thing to have. It's different than other people. But really embracing yourself and your likes and your dislikes and your own weirdness and your experiences and your expression. That's so liberating, but also completely terrifying as a thought, because we could be rejected for that. So that's a huge struggle for me. Here's another one from Robert Greene. We want to believe that there are shortcuts. We want things to be quick and easy, but the truth is that it takes persistence. That is one that Gary Vee talks about a lot, where people come up to him and say, "Oh, I've been trying this for a few months and I'm not a millionaire yet, and oh, I haven't taken off." And people's expectations about success are so crazy. They just want everything to happen now, 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 now. And Gary Vee talks a lot about the thousands and thousands. I think it's at least over 1,000 episodes of his wine podcast that he did, or YouTube videos, the thousands of episodes he did before he, became an overnight success. And persistence. We see everyone else's overnight success, and we don't see how the years and years and years of hard work. It's so easy to just see what's happening on the outside, or see it at the height or at the most successful point, and just think, oh, that just happens overnight. But yeah, there's a lot of work that it takes to get there. Tom also had another quote here, which really resonates with me. He says, "Very powerful words become trite and cliche over time because people don't get to the real meaning behind them." And I feel like that's so much of Twitter. Even the motivational stuff I see posted on LinkedIn, it's just like, yeah, me too. And it's like, okay, you said this. Here's some motivational thing. Now, how are you actually going to apply that in your life? How are you actually going to take that concept or those words and apply it to a situation that you're facing today? I think that's something that it takes a lot of work. It's so easy to just go through and, oh, who is it that says this? It looks great on your feed. Being a lion. Eric Thomas. Yeah, he talks about this. Yeah, how on your your social media you're a lion, you're a tiger and all this, but it's all just a front. It's all not. You're not actually doing it internally or doing it in a meaningful way. It's so hard for us as humans to make the distinction between what's going on the outside, what we see with our eyes, and what's happening on the inside. We can barely see it inside of ourselves, and then seeing it in someone else is practically impossible. But yeah, very powerful words can become trite and cliche over time because you don't get to the real meaning behind them. That's so true for me. So many things. I think, let's see, the most basic one for me is just breathe, stop, take a moment, count to 10. Like that's something that they say in a sitcom, when Joey from Friends is freaking out, or, whatever, like, oh, stop, just take a breath, count to 10. It's like a meme. But it's like, no, actually breathing is very important. And counting to 10 can actually have positive effects on your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a whole actual meaning and science and spirituality or whatever behind that phrase, but it just gets lost because we use it all the time. And then it becomes just a phrase thrown out in a sitcom, which I think is really weird. But that is most of my notes for the Robert Greene episode of Inside Quest, which I will post the link to the episode for, because I think this is a really fundamental one. He covers so many things about you not having control over your life and how you get it through self-mastery. And that comes from understanding yourself and controlling yourself, and understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at. How to stop and pay attention to other people to understand them. And again, I don't really want to understand people with the intent to control them, but I want to understand them with the intent of making more positive interactions with them, which is going to benefit me because I like having positive interactions with people. Nothing in life is simple. Everything is nuanced. You think everyone has the same values as you, but surprise, they don't. Retain your childlike wonder and curiosity. Let go of your ego. The feeling of superiority that you get stops you from learning. Everything is nuanced. Negative capability is the ability to keep two contradictory ideas in your mind without having to come to a conclusion, without rushing to a judgment. That one is so important. Resistance. You need resistance to grow. You need something to push against. So if you aren't experiencing any resistance right now, you got to find something to drive that for you. Mind your weirdness. Don't be a copy of other people. No matter how much media and culture wants you to just be a copy of other people. Persistence, empathy. Yeah, that's a really, really powerful episode. I think I read The Art of Seduction 10 or 15 years ago. I'm definitely going to go check out Mastery and the 48 Laws of Power on Audible and re-listen to those. And I believe he's working on a new book. I didn't see it on Audible. I'll have to check it out on Amazon. He talks about it a lot in the Inside Quest episode. So those are my thoughts on that episode. Again, I've watched it probably 50 times. It is, yeah, I know the whole thing inside out now. It's amazing. So I highly recommend you check that out. Thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this. I know I've definitely absorbed the Robert Greene episode, and especially now I've kind of cross-referenced it with the Kenny Florian episode, and I'm making notes on where they have theories that intersect and how they sort of have different perspectives on things. So I'll probably be doing a separate episode about that. But that is all I have for today. I look forward to doing another episode of Inside Quest with you again very soon. So I would love for you to check that out and sign up for my email list, which has about 10 people on it right now. So you'll be very important if you put yourself on there. So I'll put a link to that also in the show notes. And thank you for listening to the Risk Being Seen podcast. Bye-bye.